everybody. We're back. Thank you for letting us know we're live. Brian and I were just bantering backstage. So I was just saying to Brian that I'm used to doing live events, and I woke up this morning feeling much more nervous about a virtual event because of the technical stuff. There's a lot to think about, but I love how everyone's got such a great attitude and sense of humor. And Brian, I'm so incredibly honored that you're here today with us. I love the California connection with Canada. You guys, there's a real great California contingent here today, and I think we can learn from each other. Like, there's stuff that you guys can do that we cannot do, and vice versa. So I think it's good to, like, you know, inspire each other, push each other, maybe make some connections, and you know, go from there. And what was exciting, as I said in my opening, is that cannabis became an essential service in Canada. I don't know if you got the same designation down in California. I'd love to hear how that went for you. But, you know, in Canada, they said, okay, it's an essential service. And then they reversed that decision, you know, a couple of weeks in, and people went bananas. And 5 days later, they changed it back and said, yes, okay, cannabis is back open. And we also broke down some barriers with regulatory during COVID too. So I look at it, you know, for me, it's like, you got to look at the opportunities as well as the challenges. And an opportunity is to push some of those regulatory boundaries. Like, we were allowed to do online ordering directly from a retailer, which we weren't allowed to before, curbside pickup and delivery. That has since been reversed, at least in Ontario. So there's a little bit of back and forth, but I think, you know, overall, it's pretty exciting that we got, you know, we went from illegal to an essential service designation. Anyways, with that said, I want to give you a proper formal introduction, Brian, because you doing some amazing things. So let me read your bio. So Brian Applegarth is the founder and executive director of the California Cannabis Tourism Association. And I love that you guys have an association, because we don't have one here yet in Canada, but maybe we should. Brian Applegarth is the founder and executive director of this California Cannabis Tourism Association and president of Enlightened Strategies, a company that advises hotels and destinations. Brian is a leading cannabis tourism thought leader, researcher, educator, and international speaker on the topic. He's an expert advisor to MMGY Global and MMGY Travel Intelligence, the world's largest integrated marketing company specializing in the travel, tourism, and hospitality industry. A seasoned traveler himself, Brian has lived in, worked in, or traveled to over 50 different countries. A cannabis culture and history enthusiast, Brian is an award-winning documentarian and the creator of the Cannabis Trail, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to preserving and celebrating the cannabis history of California. And I believe I saw this morning that you made a really exciting announcement about a partnership. So that was with Cal Travel, is that right, Brian?
Yeah, it's super exciting. So the California Travel Association is the association, it's the united voice of the travel industry of California, which which represents $40 billion state. Wow. And we basically started a cannabis tourism committee under Cal Travel. I was approached by Barb and the team a few months back, and yeah, very exciting, and we had great response. So essentially the people on the committee are destinations throughout California, hotel stakeholders that are looking to get educated about the opportunities and the risks and just understand everything from hemp to cannabis tourism.
Amazing. Yep. Okay, with that said, I'm going to let you talk. I'll fade into the background. Over to you, Brian.
All right, thanks, Jennifer. Everybody, welcome. Good morning from California. You know, just to start off, thanks for the introduction. You know, just to understand a little bit about how I approach the cannabis and hemp industry, really, you know, the more people that are utilizing this plant in some way to improve quality of life is a win globally. So talk about collaboration between countries. I feel like between Canada, the United States, and Mexico, there's a lot of discussion to be had about drawing people to our region of the world. There's a lot of history and culture that threads throughout all of it. So it's very exciting. I look at it in a very collaborative spirit. And the idea is to get as much cannabis, hemp, and CBD into people's hands, have them wearing it. And it's just going to make everything happier and healthier. So that's kind of my ethos. Today's talk is about cannabis, an essential service. I'm going to go really quickly. We have a lot of slides to get through. It's going to be an information-packed 20, 25 minutes here. And I will make some of these slides available. Just email me after the presentation and I'm happy to share what I've done and discuss further. So with that, we're going to go to this next slide. This is just the session overview. So like in the past 6 months, cannabis has earned the essential designation and really has proven itself recession-proof. When you look at the price per pound prior to COVID versus now, you know, it's gone up and the demand's gone up, which makes that essential designation, it ties into medical services, patient access, compassionate use. And then now we have the essential designation. And what does that mean for tourism? So today we're going to talk about the definition of essential. We're going to look at the medical history of cannabis in Canada, as well as the United States and California. We're going to wrap our heads around what is medical cannabis tourism and where is that headed and how has it lived. And then we're going to take a quick dive into the cannabis motivated travel research that I recently completed with Enlightened and our partner MMGY Travel Intelligence. And then we're going to talk about 3 specific talking points for the essential cannabis role in recovery from this COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, so first off, definition of essential. So in Canada, the federal government defines an essential service as any service, facility, or activity of the government of Canada that is or will be necessary for the safety or security of the public or a segment of the public. In California, and we're going to toggle between California and the federal U.S. level because it's still illegal there, but in California, it's in its 3rd year of legalization for adult use. And then in California, the definition of essential is the state government defines essential businesses as those that provide food, shelter, social services, and homeless services, and other necessities of life. And that continues to come up. That was 3 words, necessities of life, for economically disadvantaged or otherwise needy individuals, businesses and services necessary for maintaining the safety, sanitation, and essential operation of a residence. So just to wrap our heads around essential, that's a side-by-side of how Canada and California define those. So let's first dive into the medical cannabis history of Canada. In July 2001, Health Canada established regulation for accessing cannabis for medical purposes known as the Medical Marijuana Access Program or regulations. And then the regulations really outlined 2 different categories, and we're going to look at those. Category 1 covered any symptoms that were treated with the context of compassionate, which is a buzzword or one of the vocabularies around this kind of topic, compassionate end-of-life care, or at least one of the symptoms associated with medical conditions below. And it talks about pain and anorexia, weight loss, HIV, AIDS, of course, and cancer, epilepsy, a lot of the ones that are kind of the poster children for medical cannabis. And then when we look at the second category, it's for applicants who have debilitating symptoms of medical conditions other than category 1. So it kind of is more of a broad stroke. And I put that visual there to really show that all the different cannabinoids, and this is just a fraction of them, but these all are very therapeutic in nature. And cannabis has a long history of being a medical application in multiple different cultures around the world in different ways at different times. On April 2014 in Canada, the Medical Marijuana Access Program, which was instilled in 2001, was replaced by the Marijuana for Medical Purposes Regulations, or the MMPR, by Health Canada. And then in June 2015, the Supreme Court of Canada expanded the definition of medical cannabis to include any form of the drug. So it really opened up the methods of ingestion, right? And that's when the minds start opening and people start understanding it in a wider way. And then in April 2020, Canada's federal government deemed medical cannabis production essential to the country's critical healthcare infrastructure. And rightly so. I did not know about the 2-week reversal and back out. That's interesting. But, this is a really defining historical moment that cannabis is being defined as an essential business. And it's something we really need to really continue discussing and understanding. So as far as the United States, it's interesting. One second here. Let's just go here. Yeah. So as a lead into the US slide, actually medical cannabis was in the United States Pharmacopoeia, which is the official medical journal of the United States, in the 3rd edition, which lasted from 1850 to 1941. And it was listed in there as an application for multiple ailments. And then it was removed in 1941. I believe it was 1941. And then we dive into the slide here where we look at the first medical cannabis program that existed in the US was actually orchestrated by the federal government. A lot of people don't know this. It was in 1978, and it was called the Compassionate IND Program. And it was brought about by a lawsuit by a guy named Robert Randall, who said that to treat his glaucoma, he needed cannabis as a medical necessity, and he won. So the Compassionate Investigational New Drug Program, or the IND program, allowed patients with serious medical conditions in the United States to apply and to be supplied cannabis from the federal government. They would get a tin of joints from the government. And this was in operation until 1992. They got a flood of applications from HIV/AIDS patients at that time, and they were overwhelmed with kind of how to manage that. Is what the story is. And so they shut that program down in 1992. And then, next slide's coming up here. So, and then the next medical law that passed in California was Proposition P, which passed in November 1991 with 80% of the vote, and it was adopted in 1992. And really what this did is it provided a layer of protection for the doctors. So Proposition P would not penalize physicians in prescribing hemp preparations for medical purposes. And that was how California really was able to move the needle forward when it came to medical legalization, which is the next slide, in 96. So that layer of protection that Prop P allowed for physicians to start writing scripts with some kind of protection legally, which kind of was one of the major pathways that led to the Compassionate Use Act of 1996, which legalized medical cannabis, medical marijuana in California, and was the first state to redo that in the US. Okay, and this is the Prop 215 slide. So, this was the real big turning point. This is, California's Proposition 215, also known as the Medical Use of Marijuana Initiative, or the Compassionate Use Act. On November 5th, 1996, it passed with 56% of the vote. And really what this did was it made, medical cannabis a thing in California. And it allowed for the gray market evolution that happened between 1996 and the legal market. And it was historic. So that's a little bit about the medical history of cannabis, was it's directly tied to the essential designation because it's a necessity of life. People depend on it. I encourage everybody to study a little bit more about what medical cannabis is and kind of what applications it has. So this next section, we're going to dive into some of these data slides. So now we're going to really pivot into the tourism narrative around this. So this is recent research that was really presented. It's been going on for about a year, and it was this abridged kind of report was released on July 9th. And really what this study was a survey that looked at the cannabis-motivated traveler in the United States and tried to really build out that profile of who is motivated to experience cannabis or hemp or CBD, wellness, cultural tours, all the different elements around cannabis and hemp as it's going to exist as a destination product. What traveler is motivated by that? What's their age? What's their income? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to look at 3 slides here as it's relevant to the kind of the essential presentation. This first one is really about consuming cannabis for health benefits. And the interesting learning we had on this slide is that, there's definitely an interest. There's different audience segments that prefer this kind of travel. And also the THC interest and the health benefits of THC is nearly equal to that of the interest of CBD, which I found surprising when this came back. And then I started thinking about CBG and CBN and all the other cannabinoids that haven't really had their day in the sun yet. So this health benefit kind of motivator is very present, which I think is going to fold in a deep way to the wellness kind of traveler and the yoga and what does it look like for botanical natural medicine versus medical application to, perhaps treat a more severe end of life cancer type situation, and how is that going to segment out? But that health-related interest is absolutely present. Okay, next slide. All right, this next one is about consuming cannabis. So, wait, hold on one second. Went over to, I'm going to go back one, sorry. So this second slide is about consuming cannabis, and it really talked about methods of ingestion of this cannabis-motivated traveler and how do they prefer to engage with cannabis or hemp in a destination. And you'll notice interesting finding is that vaping and smoking were at the bottom of the barrel for this. The actual cannabis motivated traveler is really interested in the innovation side of beverages, of topicals, of kind of edibles. And I think this really debunks kind of that stoner stigma that some destinations and hotels are really kind of afraid of, because the cannabis motivated traveler, it's not about necessarily clouds of smoke. It's about engaging with cannabis in a way that suits them. Which in a lot of the study found is in this kind of topical, edible, drinkable format, and it's something to consider, because then the conversation is opened up of how do we serve a visitor versus somebody who's more local, right? And what does that look like, and how do you have a plan around that, from communications to public safety and beyond? And then this last slide is really about how these travelers self-describe. And they're foodies. They love the beach. You know, the ones where you see the dark underline is where you see the biggest gap or the differentiator. And you'll see that cannabis people love wine. You know, they're wine enthusiasts. So it's really interesting, because you learn that cannabis motivated travelers are actually very active, and they spend a lot of money, and they stay a long time. And there is definitely an opportunity for collaboration with the other tourism stakeholders. Like, is there an attraction, a museum, an art gallery to be working with to create an experience that really shows kind of what is the cannabis brand of a destination, and how do we message around this to draw this traveler in and include them? Okay, cool. So now we're going to dive into the cannabis role in recovery. There's really 3 talking points that I want to kind of close with this on. We have this essential designation, and prior to COVID-19, at least in California, a lot of the conversation of the travel industry was about over tourism. You know, what is sustainable? How are you a destination steward? And literally overnight, it went from that to, oh my gosh, we're collapsing. How do we get visitors? So the volatility that we've discovered in the pandemic is a fascinating kind of moment in time that we're watching. And the conversations in my world went from advocating and kind of being an evangelist and an educator and really trying to spin up the tourism and travel industry, as well as the cannabis side, and understand kind of what does the tourism and travel industry value and how do they operate, and how can we blend these two industries together, to everyone's talking about COVID, which is totally understandable, and the role of recovery, and how does a destination or a hotel or an attraction or an event recover and find out what the next step is to survive and get back on track. So it's been a really interesting time watching kind of the troubleshooting and the task forces and all the input that has gone to trying to address the issue at hand. So the first thing we need to talk about, which happened with cannabis, is the essential designation, right? So by definition, as stated before, essential businesses are those that provide necessities of life. Cannabis has been deemed essential, and rightfully so. It's a medicine that humans depend on for their daily health and wellness. And here's where the argument comes in, which is really interesting, and I'll color this in a little bit after stating this. So if cannabis operators were embraced and included without hesitation in the tourism ecosystem of a destination, and additionally participated in the funding model of DMOs, as an essential business, they offer a funding stream that offers stability and dependability in times of crisis. And cannabis is arguably recession-proof. So what that essential designation means, and what that kind of proposition is in California, at least, and in many destinations in the United States, there's these things called DMOs, which are destination marketing organizations. And their job is to draw visitation as an economic driver. A lot of their funding, not all, but quite often it comes from hotels and a hotel assessment where they collect a fee that goes into a fund that fuels the marketing. And so the hotel stakeholders, more often than not, are the crux to the funding for the destination marketing. And cannabis, prior to being designated essential, was a different conversation. Now we have this essential designation where if a destination did have 4 or 5 or however many cannabis partners that were included in the tourism ecosystem, from attractions to hotels, DMOs, rental cars, planes, all the things that make up a tourism product for a destination, if the DMO was to include in a very robust way cannabis operators, and look at that as a potential funding source, the essential designation becomes very interesting because sales are up. So is there a form of funding that can play in? Do you have the cannabis operators in your destination that are hospitality polished enough and understand how to collaborate and are willing to collaborate with the travel industry in a meaningful way? But once you organize and coordinate your destination and have some of these lounges, cafes, retail shops, those could be amazing funding sources for the DMO, and they could have a seat at the table, so to speak, in a very aligned way. So this is one way to talk about what the essential designation means for cannabis and how it can step into a role with the destination or a hotel and really provide some stability funding wise. And those DMOs a lot of times have very high representation of hotel owners, obviously, as well as attractions and others. Okay, so the next talking point is the differentiator. So cannabis is a tourism asset that has not been embraced nor maximized as an economic driver for destinations. Research says that many active travelers are curious about cannabis and CBD experiences. In a COVID-19 social distancing travel environment where drive visitation strategy is paramount for recovery, cannabis is uniquely positioned as a new and exciting experience for many. Cannabis as a new and curious niche offers a fun element of surprise that few other attractions are able to match. So essentially what we're pointing out with this second talking point around essential cannabis is that it is a differentiator for destinations that have embraced this. For Canada and the United States, it's concerned it's in an adult use capacity. There's other countries that are doing more medical, wellness-driven strategies, but we have this adult use landscape, which makes it accessible, and it removes that barrier where this traveler is interested in engaging. So if we were actually able, or if a destination was able to look at cannabis as, wow, this is something new. This is something a lot of people in Canada or in California are curious about and seeing the paper every day. And they're really waiting for the invite and understanding that if you come here, it's safe. If you come here, we have these 3 experiences that you can do. They're part of our destination. That vote of confidence in marketing and including this new, shiny, cool, kind of curious and like that fun element of surprise, right? It's like they want to dip their toe in that water and learn about CBD. And that might be it, but that might be something that drives visitation and gets people driving to destinations. So really, cannabis right now and hemp are differentiators. A lot are curious about the wellness benefits, about the industry. They're curious what the inside of a retail shop looks like. They're waiting for the invitation in a coordinated way where it feels normalized, and that just hasn't happened yet. So this is an opportunity for those destinations that are kind of on the front edge of innovation for Canada or California or the US. And then this last slide is the cannabis. This is the third talking point. This is the cannabis role in recovery, is that it's supplemental. And this is something that's really important for destinations to understand, because cannabis, because it's so stigmatized and new, it's often kept in a silo, or, I mean, even the real estate in California, there's a lot that are just tucked away in warehouse districts and things like that. And it will change over time, and we're seeing it fold into the mainstream. But, cannabis in its essence is really supplemental to experiences. So it's actually a tool to enhance your travel and your experiences. And it's all about dosing it. and having the right kind of narrative and having the right visitor experience, right? So the supplemental argument is that research shows that the cannabis travel audience is active when visiting a destination. Being an effects-based product, cannabis is supplemental to driving economic spend in destinations that spreads out across multiple businesses. Some cannabis products serve as appetite stimulants that drive subsequent spends at restaurants, while other cannabis products induce creativity, etc. So just to build around this, because a lot of people are like, when they ask me what I do, it's like I work in cannabis tourism, cannabis travel. And they say, oh, like wine tours? Like, right? Like that's the response you get every time. And the answer is no, like not like wine tours. It's approaching it from an industry-wide perspective. It's incorporating hemp as a sustainable product. It's replacing plastics in hotels. It's talking CBD and wellness. And it's also talking about the THC products with the right THC dose and the right terpene profile. It really is supplemental to different kinds of experiences, whether it be an appetite stimulant as a precursor to a Michelin star meal, or whether it be a product that promotes intimacy for a night with your partner, or whether it's something that's more creative in nature, where you go watch a jazz band, or whether you're going to go to a puff and paint kind of painting class. And all of these are going to manifest in different ways in cannabis tourism. And the creativity and the different models are incredibly exciting because cannabis is a very flexible plant. It comes down to dosing, a terpene profile, and having a guided experiences that is relatable. So where the supplemental kind of verbiage comes in for this argument is that the active, motivated cannabis traveler is active in market. They want to go eat at restaurants. I would not be surprised if there's a higher spend when you have somebody in there with the right dose that is really indulging because they're on vacation and they want to try all the things on this menu of this restaurant that they wanted to visit, right? And they're a little bit elevated. It really supports going into a museum. It allows you to be present. Cannabis allows you to be present. With the right cultivar or varietal of cannabis, it will steer you to supplement activities and experiences. It needs to be in a designed and it needs to be in a coordinated way for destinations. And that's the bridge we have to kind of build is, the opportunities are amazing. We just have to start creating the pathways to really be folded into the travel industry. And that needs to be a meeting of the minds in the middle. And also making sure that we're on brand for destinations and cannabis is collaborative. And that's something we need to all be stewarding forward. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. And really, I just wanted to kind of end with this slide. When I look at the cannabis related, you'll hear me, if anyone has seen anything else I've talked about or done or published, you'll see the word cannabis related a lot when I talk to tourism. And it's because it's really three different conversations. You have the sustainability with hemp, which is replacing plastics and paper, perhaps even building like hotels from hempcrete, just opening up that conversation around hemp products. And that also includes ancillary products, right? All the little gift shops that exist around the hotels have cannabis postcards because cannabis and hemp are absolutely trending right now. So there is opportunity just in the kind of ancillary product world with hemp. And it is an amazing renewable resource that the travel industry values sustainability anyways and destination stewardship. So this hemp tool that is now available, we should look at very closely. There's also the CBD conversation, which talks about wellness. This really folds into spa services, drinkables, topicals, botanical medicines, and it's that wellness conversation. And then you have the cannabis conversation, which goes for the THC-rich products. You'll also have corporate travel. We saw a lot of that in California once we legalized in '96. By the early 2000s, you had people coming to California to start studying and learning about the gray market, visit dispensaries, because they had the foresight to understand that this was a coming industry. And we increasingly see that. We have people coming to Northern California a lot to just learn. So that corporate travel shouldn't be dismissed either. And then lastly, which ties back into the essential designation, the patient access, the medical application of cannabis, the fact that it is recession-proof, you have that medical travel component. And that's something that's been going on to kind of hark back to like the Canadian history and the American history, the United States history of cannabis. You know, this medical traveler will become more sophisticated as they unwind the amazing biology of the cannabis plant and its ability to promote quality of life and happiness and wellness. Everything from it's opening up conversations around PTSD and all the way through to helping people get off opiates and treat cancer. So as we watch cannabis explode as an amazing tool that we haven't really studied and applied with today's technology and there is a lot of research, but it hasn't been activated in market. It's going to be really amazing to watch the journey of this plant and also all the different trends. You know, when CBG starts coming out and CBN and that whole concept around full spectrum and what is the essence of the plant prior to breaking it down and trying to isolate molecules. And it opens up that conversation. And in its essence, you know, cannabis, for those who don't know, the endocannabinoid system, which we all have, it promotes balance. I mean, it's called homeostasis, and it's all receptors throughout our body where the cannabis is kind of the macro level controls that turns knobs up and down to try to bring your body to optimum health. So cannabis it's going to be amazing to watch hemp and cannabis really restore the health and wellness of us as a society and of the world, hopefully. And with that, I just want to say thank you for having me. This last slide's coming up. Anybody interested in learning more, my company's Enlightened, enlightenedstrategies.com. Also, please check out the Cannabis Tourism, California Cannabis Tourism Association. And thank you for having me be part of this. Everybody, good luck, and thank you for your work.
Yay, thank you, Brian. That was awesome. I always learn so much every time I listen to talk. We just have time for one quick comment, and then
okay.
So one thing I thought was really interesting is you talked about the ecosystem, and something that I tell tourism companies who are interested in entering this arena is they don't have to be the experts on cannabis. That's really where you look for these partnerships. Do you have anything you want to add to that? Because I think that might be something that's in people's mind is how do I understand? Like it's so overwhelming if I don't know anything. How do I get in?
Yeah.
You know,
I think it's education, and the way that's what Enlightened tries to serve. And you know, I think all of us try to serve that in our own way. We all have to be advocates and educators right now. But there's this cross blend. There's educating the tourism travel stakeholders of the destination on cannabis and hemp, and then there's educating the retailers and deliveries and shops about hospitality, because that's not there either. So I get it when a destination is like, listen, I just don't know if we turn on a funnel of leads to a retailer, like, are they going to damage the brand of the destination? Are they compliant? Are they legal? I mean, there's all these questions that people like you and I need to serve as a conduit to be able to facilitate that dialogue. And that's what's going to move this forward is if, you know, as many people as we can around the globe, we should be educating and sharing the way we educate so we can get more of us being evangelists. And that's where it's going to work. And I think that from what I've seen in California, retailers have their hands full. So I'm not hitting on retailers in a bad way. It's really challenging with taxes. I mean, it's still a really messy supply chain. So when I go to a tour, when I say, hey, you guys want to do a tourism strategy? They're like, absolutely. I'm trying to make sure I don't close, you know, because they won't accept 280E tax write-offs yet. You know, there's all these things. So, but there are people that have the vision. I've met people in California that are really building their model with tourism in mind, which is where I hope the evolution goes, is that you have operators that are popping up or extending their retail component, their customer facing in a really resource driven way for tourists, because that's what we need for this to be done the right way, is anchors.
So great. Brian, I could talk to you for a while, but we're out of time. And but I'm sure there'll be lots of people reaching out to you and maybe signing up for your newsletter, which I get, you know, regularly, and it's awesome. So thank you again. And
thank you.
chatting with you throughout the day. There's some networking sessions, and we're having an after party with Fellow at the end of the day. So maybe
awesome.
You'll have time to join us there too. So thank you so much
Yeah.
for questions, and we will respond to them, but we have to move on to the next panel. So
okay, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Okay, bye.